This episode is brought to you by the Toyota Grand Highlander. Life's journey brings constant change filled with exciting surprises and grand challenges. And with its spaciousness, power, and style, the Toyota Grand Highlander is more than a vehicle. It's your partner in embracing all life throws at you. From the spacious adult-sized third row to seating for up to 8 passengers, the Toyota Grand Highlander is up for every grand challenge. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander. Toyota, let's go places.
The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 27, The Final Hiding Place. We have Elizabeth.
Hi everyone.
And Jen.
Hey guys.
With us again for a short but significant chapter, I think.
Yeah.
So, again, we don't have any shout-outs to get to. This episode is basically them on a dragon. And then
them off the dragon?
And then them off the dragon. That's pretty much it. It's them on and then off of the dragon. No, we do get Voldy finding out about the events that happened in the last chapter at Gringotts. So that is honestly my most interesting part of this chapter. So we do begin the chapter with Harry just being grateful. Harry is grateful that they've escaped. Just with their lives. I don't even think he's all that grateful even that they still have the cup. I think he's just like, we got out of this. How did we possibly get out of this? Ron is either fearful or delighted. We're not quite sure, but he's screaming a lot, so that's fine. And then Hermione is just sobbing. Just sobbing. So it's a literal kind of range of emotions that the trio are experiencing, and I think every one of them is valid. So the dragon ends up flying over the UK for a while at elevation, and they keep describing it as very cold. How do I know they describe it as very cold? Because they mention it 4 times in like 2 pages worth of stuff.
To be fair, they're very high up. It would be cold.
Yeah, we don't get a good gauge of just how high up the dragon is. It says...
They said they were flying through the clouds.
So
that's high up.
That's pretty high.
That could... Well, yeah.
There are planes that high.
Yeah.
I actually Googled how low clouds can possibly be. Mm-hmm. Not including fog, because fog technically is a cloud, but I'm not including fog. But there could be low-lying clouds up to about 6,500 feet.
Okay.
So, I mean, planes are usually like 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
I don't think the dragon's that high.
They would not be able to stay conscious that high.
Not
Correct.
that high.
So it's it's over 1,000 feet. Let's just say that. It's very high up.
Very high.
It's very high up. And I do know it is very cold. It's just, I just got a kick out of them saying it like repeatedly in the first 2 pages. It's cold!
Maybe it's also because they were just getting burned. So now it's like, now we're just really, really cold.
Well,
There's
initially
no good
say
temperature.
like, the nice breeze is kind of nice on the burns, but
Then it gets cold.
then their hands are just very cold.
But
That
then when
they're like clinging to the scales and it's like your cold hands are trying to hold on to something that's hard to do.
But then when they land, they'll be just right.
The Goldilocks comment from the blonde of the 3 of us. Imagine how that works. Harry realizes that Voldy would soon know he's hunting horcruxes. And starts to be like, oh, this is going to be bad. Like, now we're on a clock. Hermione, I think at one point earlier in one of the previous chapters, said, the hunt for the horcruxes can last years. Not anymore. This has got to happen. If it's going to happen, it's got to happen, like, now. Because if Voldy finds out, he's going to change up everything.
Yeah.
And it's going to be nearly impossible at that point. So, finally, the dragon ends up descending towards some water that the trio think he probably just picked up, like a glint of sunlight reflecting off water on the ground, because, again, the dragon is blind. The trio decides to jump into the water when they get a little bit closer. And they assume they see the reflection of the dragon in the water. So they're like, oh, we're pretty close, right? And then they plunge, and it takes a minute for them to actually get to the water. Like, it's a hard landing in the water. They don't really think the lake is too deep, but after struggling through reeds and mud and all of that, they finally get out of the lake. And to Harry's credit, he immediately casts defensive enchantments. He's the one, I guess, most alert at this point. I think the other two are like caught in this whirlwind of what just happened.
I also like the idea that they're like, we need to get away from this dragon because he's probably going to turn around and eat us.
It's
and
a
the
valid
dragon's
thought.
just like, I'm going to go over there because I'm free.
The dragon's first priority is hydrate, and their first priority is get away from the large thing that can eat us. Yeah.
Both things are valid.
Keep in mind, this dragon, I said for a while. I mean, this is most of the day this thing's been flying over the UK.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it has been flying for hours.
It's impressive it lasted that long.
Well, Harry has a thought of like, I don't actually know how long a dragon can be in flight for.
Yeah.
I'm presuming quite long. So I don't really know.
It also makes me wonder how many people looked up and they're like, what is that?
I would assume quite a few.
Quite a few. This is
Yeah.
a big old thing.
I mean, it was kind of going through clouds, but I can't imagine the entire journey was through cloud cover. So
This is a total aside, but one of the things that I thought was really cool about Hogwarts Legacy was that you can just randomly encounter, like, a dragon flying.
yes, I would zoom out and see the map, and then you just see a dragon flying across the map.
I never noticed that. Like, I didn't know that that was a thing. I went outside of Hogwarts for, like, the first time, and I was exploring some, like, train track, and I just look up, and there's a dragon that's, like, coming right at me. And I'm like, oh, good
Oh, you
God.
experienced it that early?
Yes.
I only experienced that late,
No.
late game.
It happened, it's only happened once on all 2.5 of my playthroughs, and it was within, like, the first 10 minutes I was outside of
Wow,
the
I never got that
Yeah,
early.
I had no idea that I completely caught me off guard.
Wow,
it was cool.
Yeah, that would be alarming as you're a lower level
Yes.
character. Like, I have zero chance of fighting off a dragon
Yeah,
right
Was it
now.
like attack you?
It flew down and I thought flamed. I don't remember. I know it flew pretty close to me and I had to, like, move over from it. Because I was like, oh, it's cool in the distance. And then it, like, kind of started coming. I'm like, okay. I'm going to go hide now.
That's interesting that you got it so early.
Yeah.
That's cool. The trio decides to take this time to reset themselves and be like, okay, what did we just do? How are we still alive? And where do we go from here? And they start with putting Essence of Dittany all over their angry red burns, which is mainly on their faces and arms, things that weren't immediately covered by clothing. However, some of their clothing was singed away in some certain places, so there's some spots that they have to apply the Dittany to. Hermione also pulls out some pumpkin juice and clean, dry robes, which probably feel amazing. They have gotten another horcrux. Excellent. They have lost the sword, which was their only way to destroy said horcrux.
Not excellent.
Not excellent.
Okay, so this is something that I'm confused about, and I did have a question about. Because they're very upset that they have lost the sword. But the sword comes to people in need.
Yes.
So they're in need.
I think it has to be a life, threatening kind of need.
Yeah.
Okay. That was what my implicit question was of, like,
Yeah.
what am I missing here?
What qualifies
Because-
as a need?
Right, like, my understanding is they should just be able to turn around and be like, I need it, and then it'll come.
I get the annoyance that it's been lost, but of the two, I'd rather have the Horcrux because there are other ways to destroy it other than the sword. So,
Yes. Yes.
Not many.
not many, but
few and far between.
At least you have more options, and it's not like the sword is the one and only way to destroy
Well,
this thing.
you needed the horcrux because without that, what can you really do?
Yeah. I love, though, the next comment they have when Hermione's like, worried about the dragon, who's going to take care of it. And Ron's like, you should worry about us. Why should we worry about us? Well, I hate to break it to you, they might have noticed that we broke it out of Gringotts, and it's just like cracking up for hours. Like,
because it's absurd.
I would be giggling for so long.
All of it is absurd. And in this moment, all three of them realize just how absurd their last 24 hours have actually been.
We literally just broke out of Gringotts.
On a dragon.
Crazy.
Like,
we destroyed the building.
However,
we're headline news.
You already were, right? Harry's literally on the front page of every paper is like, get this kid. But no, it's absurd because however you envisioned this infiltration going, I guarantee you could have run through a million scenarios and not one of them had you escaping on a dragon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whatever their wildest fantasies were about this, they exceeded it.
And they took down the wizarding economy.
Which we talked about at the end of the last episode.
This is as legendary as, like, Fred and George leaving Hogwarts on their brooms and, like, setting Peeves off on Umbridge. I bet Fred and George, when they heard this, were like, gosh darn it. They one-upped us.
Yeah.
Did they just literally send the wizarding world into, like, a mini depression?
Probably.
For this? I mean, it's obviously a depressed wizarding nation. Yeah. But, like, it's going to take a while for Gringotts to get up and going again after this.
Yeah.
Even if Voldy is defeated, I mean, it's still going to take Gringotts a little bit to...
I imagine the relations between the wizards and the goblins are also at
an all-time low.
All-time, like, oh, we're quite testy with each other right now. Like...
Yes, relations probably aren't great. So there's a lot there that needs to get sorted out. But Harry ends up finally succumbing to the intense head pain that he has been feeling that's gotten worse and worse and worse.
He said it felt like it being hit with a sword.
Yeah. Eventually it just becomes so overwhelming that he can't possibly fight this off anymore. And it ends up being Harry, as Voldy, standing in a room with a semicircle of wizards and a goblin on the ground. Fury and fear burned inside him. The only thing he dreaded seems to now have happened. As the goblin reveals, it was Potter that took a small golden cup. Voldy lets out a rage scream and becomes crazed, frenzied. Green light erupts around the room. The goblin is immediately killed. Everyone scatters. Bellatrix and Lucius, who are in attendance, begin throwing others to the side and behind them to flee from this Voldy rage. There are many deaths.
I don't know why those two would have even wanted to be in the room.
Oh, they had a choice. I don't think they had a choice.
I could see it as if they did have a choice, that they both seem to be very... They crave information. They want to be in the know. So I could imagine either of them are just always where Voldemort is when Voldemort's around, just to like,
Bellatrix,
I'm here, my lord, let me serve, you know, like...
Bellatrix has to be there because it's her vault. So
that's fair.
She Lucius, has to be there. Lucius...
His house, I guess, but still.
I mean, he might have maybe some relations with the goblins, considering how his aristocrat status kind of is.
He was exchanging gold.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe he has some sort of relationship with the goblins there, but...
I obviously don't like the reality of the visual, but the idea of Voldemort just, like, killing random people because he's so angry and everyone just trying to be like, get me out of here! Like that, like, it's just such crazed, not panic, but fury, and just, like, he's been so controlled the vast majority of the book, so to see him just lose all of it, it's like, oh gosh.
Seriously. Like, I think we get caught up with whatever image of Voldy that we have, this image of, Ralph Fiennes, because that's the image I think most people have probably now of what Voldy might look like. Remember, that's not the book description, right? He's much more snake-like. Mm-hmm. The teeth, the eyes are glowing red. Like, he's just normally a visage that you wouldn't want to be in the presence of. Him angry and with like we talked about Bellatrix having no conscience,
Yeah.
right? Voldy does have a conscience. He usually has a plan. He's goal-oriented, usually. Here, nope. It's out the window. And he has no conscience, and he is killing people. Not just torturing them, and he doesn't care. Mm-hmm. But if Bellatrix got in the way of one of these, I don't think he would blink an eye at it. Mm-mm. He is killing whoever and whatever happens to be in this room. So you best get out.
I do find it really interesting that he was willing to just kill indiscriminately, because it's not a very strategic, it's not very Slytherin of him. It's not very planned, it's not very cunning, it's not very, like, I'm
He's
thinking
cutting out
through
his
these
inside
things.
people.
Yeah, like, that's actually probably what you don't want to be doing when you find out that Harry Potter knows about your horcruxes, is, like, killing your inner circle that's theoretically your smarter people. Like, that's also just
I don't
really...
know that it's his inner circle. I think these are the only 2 Death Eaters he brought. I think the semicircle of wizards were their guards. The guards from Gringotts.
I see it as him just being like...
I had the same thought initially of, why would he have a semicircle and start killing all of his Death Eaters? Mm-hmm. I took it as those were the only 2 that he brought. The semicircle was the guard wizards.
Why would Bella and Lucius be standing in front of them, though? Wouldn't they be standing behind?
I took it as him realizing that everybody he gives any semblance of trust to fails him. So he's like, screw it. I gotta do it myself.
Well, no.
I'm gonna kill whoever because you guys are idiots and you keep messing up my plans, so just die.
He's like, I am over this.
Yes.
So I think... So obviously you have Lucius and Bellatrix, who I think are standing beside Voldy to interrogate the goblin. And I think Bellatrix truthfully wants genuinely to be there and to also participate in the interrogation of the goblin because, again, her vault was broken into.
Yeah.
She can't be pleased about it herself.
No.
Maybe not to the level of Voldy, but she's certainly upset about it. So they're going to be there. And then you have the semicircle of wizards or whatever. And I still think that it's the wizard guards. So then when you have him start firing off killing curses, literally the 2 people standing next to him are like, yep, nope. And then like start throwing people out of the way to get as far away from this dude as possible. But
I suppose that's where knowing the outlay of the house is really beneficial.
Yep.
Where's the nearest exit?
I thought this was at Gringotts.
I thought it was Malfoy
I thought this
Manor.
was Malfoy Manor. He was standing in a dimly lit room, and a semicircle of wizards faced him, and on the floor at his feet knelt a small quaking figure.
I think he wants to go see the vault. I don't think he's taking their word for anything. I think he'd go there.
Well, how would he know to go to the vault first, though? I took it as, like, they came to him being like, hey, just FYI, the vault got broken into. And he's like, what? And, like, die. Like, if they told him, hey, there's a problem, come to Gringotts, I feel like he'd be like, give me the information now before I go. And then the anger would happen, and then it would be death regardless.
Yeah, I kind of always imagined that this was happening at Malfoy Manor and that they were just having a conference of it at Malfoy Manor.
I don't know. I always assumed it was him going to Gringotts to inspect the vault.
Yeah, because I always took it as like, well, how would he know to go there if no one informed him first that a break-in had happened?
Oh, and I'm sure they informed him that a break-in happened in Gringotts, and I bet you he was at Gringotts in a second. Like, it's not like he's getting in a car and going to Gringotts. I think he's there in a second.
But I would see, like, if they were like, hey, there's been a break-in, he'd be like, hey, excuse me, you die. Like,
well, that's what I'm saying. So he gets
angry.
notified, like, hey, there's been a disturbance at Gringotts, and he's like, I'm sorry, which place? Gringotts?
Right.
Boom, I'm there.
The one thing that stuck out to me is that he's questioning the goblin because he starts by saying, what did you say to me?
Yeah.
And then he says, say it again. And the goblin says, we tried to stop them, but they broke into the Lestrange vault.
Yep.
So that was why I think I always assumed it was like he didn't know it had happened. The goblin was brought to him by whatever.
I just think it's someone told him that there's been a break-in at Gringotts, and he just went to Gringotts, and he's like, I'm not messing with this. I'm finding out in person what happened. I'm not having people send me through the grapevine. Like, no. My eyes on this.
Voldemort very much believes in the idea that you kill the messenger.
Yep.
He's at the point where he's killing anybody.
Plus the messenger.
He has... All of his cares are gone. He does not care anymore.
Yep.
He's out for vengeance. So, yeah, but I had always assumed it was like they had informed him about the Green Gots break-in or the disturbance of the Green Gots, and then he went there. We will get to why I specifically think that in part 2 of this chapter, because he then dwells on some other important objects in his life. So we will take a little break here, and we will be back with part 2. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, so we are back with part 2 of chapter 27, The Final Hiding Place. And obviously we ended with Voldy finding out about all of this. He's not done with this. He begins to reflect on his other horcruxes as he strolls amongst the dead. And he thinks of the diary, which is destroyed. He thinks of the cup, which is now proven to be stolen. He is surprised, I suppose, that he wasn't able to feel them be destroyed or taken or whatever have you.
Well, I said with the not feeling the diary being destroyed, he felt that made sense because he didn't have a physical body at that point. Obviously, the cup hasn't been destroyed, but everything else, he's like, clearly they still exist. I would have felt it otherwise. Duh.
But doubt has now crept in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which makes sense. I mean, like, you have split your soul into different entities. So it makes perfect sense for him to not feel one's destruction is no longer a part of him.
I do think it's interesting that this wasn't something, and obviously he wouldn't have worried about this before or looked into this at all or tried to figure this out in some capacity because he never expected himself to be in this position. But I do find it interesting that this is something that it's clearly not something he ever prepared for.
Yeah.
It's also
unprecedented because nobody else has made more than one Horcrux before.
Yep.
That's correct. He's pushing the boundaries of magic. So truly no one's dove this far into it before, so there is no expectation because expectation hasn't been established. So
Yeah.
I love immediately that was like, Dumbledore's behind this.
well, so he begins to think of the other Horcruxes. He thinks of locations first, specifically. He thinks of the lake, he thinks of the shack, and he thinks of Hogwarts. So he begins like literally playing this out in his head. He's confident the ring is safe because no one knows his connections. No one knows his history, his family history. That's been fairly locked up. He hasn't really been open about any of that. Mm-hmm. So clearly the ring is safe. The locket being stolen is absurd. He uses the word absurd. He thinks it is completely absurd that the locket could even be at risk.
Well, he was like, how could he possibly know about the cave? Let alone, how could he possibly penetrate all of the protection spells that I put on it?
Not just
Which
him.
is fair, because
Anybody.
he wouldn't have been able to.
Not just him. Anybody.
Yeah.
He's thinking no one knows about the cave, because those have been tightened up.
Yeah.
The spells placed upon this cave are intense. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's insane how thorough he was with those protections. So
Yet for all of these things, he never put on a spell that could alert him
Yeah.
if someone
So
wandered
broken.
in.
yeah.
What surprises me is more that, like, he thinks, okay, well, this one alone is the most safe because of all my penetration spells. I'm like, well, why didn't you do that with all of them?
Right.
Like, why only really go uber protection on one when you could have done that with all?
Well, so...
Or at least
We'll
majority?
get into the breakdown of the horcruxes here, but... So, he thinks the locket being stolen is completely ludicrous. So he moves on to the other one, and he says... He alone has discovered the secrets of Hogwarts, so surely that was safe. And the idea there is, I think, his weakest argument. But again, we'll break down what we think of his protections and his locations here in a second. Nagini, he thinks of, which Nagini's alive, and now must never leave his side. She will be very close, not sent out on errands anymore.
No more, like, impersonating dead bodies.
As ridiculous as it is to think that any of them have been compromised, he will now revisit them all and redouble the protections. So, it's with that, with that line is why I thought he went to Gringotts specifically. After he heard that Gringotts had been infiltrated, he was like, oh no, I'm going there, and I'm making sure that that cup is in that vault or it is not. I need to know specifically. The idea of visiting all of the horcruxes and redoubling protections, I think, is an interesting idea because some of these protections are pretty gnarly. I mean, we don't know the extent that the ring was protected in the shack.
Yeah.
We've theorized as to what those protections may have been on some previous episodes. But, I mean, Dumbledore went himself. I'm sure the protections were significant. Hogwarts, I think, is the weakest because it is way too arrogant a thought to presume that out of everyone that has visited Hogwarts, and there have been some prestigious, hyper-intelligent people that have roamed the halls of Hogwarts. It is an insanely arrogant idea to presume that you are the only one to know every nook and cranny of that place.
He's an arrogant person.
This is the first time I think he lets it out, though, because usually he backs it up. This one is... I guess what I'm saying is, he's arrogant without basis to, like, check it. He knows he's magically more gifted than most people. Why? You have no basis to say that you know more about Hogwarts than other people.
You know what parallel it's honestly making me think about? Like, when Hermione holds the first DA meeting in the Hog's Head, and she's like, well, there's less people here, we won't be overheard. There's the arrogance of, like, I know what's best to do here, but it backfired because with less people, then obviously more people can overhear you. Now I think it's the opposite, where it's I alone, because I alone have examined the whole castle, know the best hiding places, whatever. And it's like, you're forgetting the fact that this place is populated by at least 100 people on a daily basis, year after year after year after year after year. People will look for things. People stumble upon things. Dumbledore himself said he didn't even know all the secrets of the castle. So to think that you alone could be safe with this Horcrux, like...
It's based on nothing.
Yeah.
You can't prove that.
He's just convincing himself that that's right.
I think that's it. I think he's self-talking himself up.
Yeah.
Being like, that can't possibly be true.
That was what I read this chapter as, because especially to your point, every year there are people staying at Hogwarts for, months on end, and it's all like teenagers. And if there's one thing that teenagers are going to do, it's going to poke around and try to figure things out and try to exploit the rules.
Especially
and try to,
since they never give him a tour of the castle.
Right, so naturally their interest is piqued, right? Like you want to learn about this magical place that has moving staircases. You're going to go poking around.
And you have the weekends to do it.
You have the weekends to do it. They tell you, oh, well, don't do it, don't go out of your dorms after 9 o'clock. That's going to make a lot of people want to go out of their dorms after 9 o'clock. Like, that's not a foolproof system. But I feel like most of his reasonings here are 100% he's convincing himself of it, where he's like, well, no one can possibly know about the locket because that was a past thing. And then he says something immediately right afterwards where he's like, well, But Dumbledore might have known about it because of the orphanage. Or, like, no one could ever have connected me to the Gaunts. So they'll never figure out the ring. But Dumbledore knew my middle name. And it's like, so you're immediately contradicting all of the things that you're saying for why it's the safest horcrux. Or why you're not worried about this horcrux. So it's, you know, on some level.
That's a lot of panicked reassurance.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
To be fair to him, I mean, literally one person cracked this. One. In the entire wizarding world. It is. You're right. It is. It only does take one.
Yep.
It takes one prodigious one.
Yep.
Yes.
But, I mean, let's be real. These protections, all of them, how many people are getting through? I mean, they're, my goodness, they're airtight. It took possibly one of the greatest wizards of all time to figure out and get through the ring and the locket.
Well, that's why I like that he's like, there's no way the boy figured this out. This is Dumbledore working through him from the dead. And I was like, well, yeah, because...
Yeah, it's not Potter. Potter can't possibly have figured this out. It had the only person he could possibly think of, which he's right.
Yeah.
He's not even wrong about that. So it's like, trying to put myself into Voldy's shoes at this point, and I'm like, it would be hard for me to believe it.
Yeah.
Because I know how good I am, and then how I've set this up, and how unbelievably random. Everybody's like, well, why don't you just throw the ring in the ocean and call it a day? That lake setup, he believes he's doing more than that. Because he's not only just putting it in a super random location, he's blocking it behind aggressive multiple layers of advanced magic.
And to be fair, if he had just thrown it in the ocean in some random spot, you can't go to check that it's still there. These locations, he can go back and check and see.
Yeah. His biggest issue with this, though, too, is that he's picked, like, one of the reasons that they've been able to pick apart what these horcruxes are so far is that he picked things that were significant to him.
Yeah.
That they had meaning to him. Which is a different form of arrogance that...
And a serial killer trait.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. Yep.
He hasn't killed anybody.
Rewind like 10 minutes. So he's slaughtering everybody in the room. So
It would be weird, honestly, because that was the other suggestion. There's a throw it in the ocean suggestion that a lot of fans have come up with. There's also the, why don't you make a random rock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This random penny.
That seems weird to me. Like, who does that? You'd want to make a piece of your soul.
Yeah.
Some undying piece of you. And you want to put it in some mundane rock that you just found? Like, it doesn't really make sense. I don't think many people would really choose that.
See, to me, it does make sense. Because that's how you trip people up.
You would want a piece of you.
Yeah.
That would live on forever.
Yeah.
In something just as...
Well, if you had more than one.
Yes.
I think if you only had one, then you want the safest object possible and you want it in the most secure location possible. I think the idea of having, like, the one in Hogwarts, to a degree, makes sense because you're like, okay, it's so populated there that who would think to look there? You would think that it's going to be where nobody ever goes, like the cave or the Gaunt house. So there's like a little... He was smart with the reverse psychology, even if he wasn't necessarily actively thinking that. It still worked out that way.
And, I mean, even think of, like, if you could somehow pin down... It would be hard to pin down that he was related to the Gaunts, only because look at where the Gaunts were at the end of their lives. One died in Azkaban, like, and the other died, like, just this horrible existence. Like, it'd be such a stretch for anybody to be like, the Dark Lord, this shack where, like, at the end of their line, they were ragged and just destitute and, like...
Well, then, too, even knowing his name. I mean, like, you think of celebrities who have taken on their fake personas, and you're like, I would know you as your stage name, not necessarily your real person name. So who's going to know Tom Marvolo Riddle and be like, oh, Marvolo, The genealogy there relates him to the Gaunts.
And then you're thinking, the two things that we've learned from the get-go in this series of books, the two safest places, Gringotts and Hogwarts. Well, where has he hid 2 of them? Gringotts and Hogwarts.
Yeah, which of course makes Harry very like, I told you guys.
Yep.
I told you it'd be at Hogwarts.
Yeah, but again, if you're Voldy and you're hiding these things, you're like,
Yeah.
Not only am I just hiding it at Gringotts, so you can't just break into, like, vault number whatever that's right next to the opening door. Mm-hmm. You're going to the deepest depths of this super secure location with all these protections. There's no way. Literally no way.
I don't disagree with you. I just think that if he's going to do it, he needs to do it in something that's not as tied to him.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you put it in the Chamber of Secrets, and it's like,
Well, this
of
one
course
isn't.
you would.
This one isn't. Him and his family don't have a vault of Gringotts. He's not connected to the cup at all, other than he worked for the woman who actually owned it.
There's the connection, though.
Yeah, but it's a Hufflepuff's cup. You have to track down where the cup was. How far did that go? Where did it go after her death? There's a lot of connections you gotta make to
But
get
it's
there.
possible to do it, as opposed to if I just do it in some random, like...
And it's also a cup, so where are you putting that? I mean, a cup could be anywhere.
No, I know. I agree with you on all of your points, and I agree that it makes sense to put it in Hogwarts and it makes sense to put it in Gringotts. All I'm saying is that if you're going to split your soul into 6 pieces, maybe don't make all 6 of those pieces into something that can somehow be related to some portion of your life, because he basically used it as a snapshot of where he was at different parts of his time. That's why Dumbledore was able to figure it out. So I'm saying maybe just take one of those 6 and just put it into something that you think is ugly and you wouldn't wear in public, or you know.
It's the same flaw of, like, the serial killers who do take the trophies.
Yes.
It's like you're consistent in what you take because that's your addiction. That's the thing that you feel gives you the satisfaction of what you've killed. So if you deviated from that, you'd feel weird about it, but it would throw off the scent.
It's the grandeur of it. He's not a common wizard. Mm-hmm. So how dare I put a piece of such a great and powerful person
Right.
in something so mundane? He wants... That's why he didn't even choose great and powerful relics. He wanted the greatest, the most powerful relics.
That is his undoing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can track his level of grandeur and be like, you know...
I get it from his perspective. It's just not a good strategy to have. But that's been consistent with his behavior across all of the books. He acts out of arrogance a lot of the time, and it ends up being his undoing in most of the books that he's been in so far.
I do like him thinking about Hogwarts as a location, though, because it's like there are, like we've talked, there's so many locations within Hogwarts. There's secret locations like the Chamber of Secrets or the room requirements. There are the different common rooms that you could have gone into. There's the whole Forbidden Forest. There's the lake. Like, there's any place on the grounds could be the location of this ring. So if he's just thinking the general location of Hogwarts, I'd be like thinking the general location of Disney World. Like, is it in the Haunted Mansion? Is it in the Pirates of the Caribbean? Like, water at the bottom? Like, where did you put this last horcrux, and how to find it in time before you come to check on it?
I mean, that's what this whole book has been. It's like, okay, we know what they are, and we know where they might be. Mm-hmm. There's still the gaping question of, how do we still get them?
Yeah.
I mean, even though we know what they are and potentially where they are, even still getting them is a momentous struggle.
Which
that's
is why
going
he
to
said,
be
like,
death-defying.
That's why he said Hogwarts, he felt confident that was perfectly safe because Harry can't enter Hogsmeade without detection. And then he was toying with the idea of, like, should I tell Snape that he might be coming? Oh, I don't know, because Bellatrix and Malfoy.
Well, yeah, that's another topic that I want to get. So he ends up figuring out, the only way to know is I have to go revisit these. And I have to see for myself, are they there or are they not? Mm-hmm. So he says he'll choose to visit the Gaunt House first, as he considers it the most vulnerable of the locations. So it's more out in the open. It's...
Dumbledore knew his middle name, made the
Dumbledore
connection.
could make the connection.
Yep.
Dumbledore's obviously very capable of breaking whatever he thought those protections would be. So he's like, okay, the Gaunt's the first. That's the most vulnerable one. I'll go there first. He then says the lake. Surely impossible. Surely. But Albus may have known his past misdeeds at the orphanage, so he might have at least guessed the location. So the lake, even though it's an absurd thought, could, I suppose, be vulnerable, so he'll go there next. And then, like you said, it's impossible for Harry to enter Hogsmeade without detection, so we know that he hasn't at least been there yet. And if he's hunting horcruxes, he probably hasn't been on this for the last 5 or 6 years. This is probably a fairly recent hunt. So Hogwarts will be last, because that's where we are fairly confident, at least it's probably still there.
And there's 3 Death Eaters there, so kind of hard to break into.
Yeah.
That's some solid logic on his part.
Mm-hmm.
And how to break down the order? Yeah, no, I agree. It's pretty logical.
And Nagini's right here, so we know she's safe.
And never again will Nagini not be by his side.
Yep.
Either way, he decides, you know what? Even though I'm choosing Hogwarts as the safest location right now, I should probably let Snape know that Harry might be trying to get to the castle. Probably a prudent decision to make. However, the one bit of doubt that he does have about informing Severus is that it was clearly a mistake to trust Lucius and Bellatrix with his greatest possessions, his greatest secrets, the greatest parts of himself. So he does have that little hint of doubt of like, maybe I shouldn't tell Severus about this.
Well, as he's discovered, he tells somebody and then it backfires.
So with that thought, there's a couple of ways I want to kind of address Voldy here. Dumbledore has been on Voldy constantly about the differences between Voldy and Harry and what makes Harry different. And part of that is friendship and love and just how he treats people. Voldy here is having a thought of like, I gave them too much. I did have trust. I did place my faith in others. Despite what others may from the outside view me as, I did place my trust in other people. And I got burned, potentially very badly, by doing it. Mm-hmm. So you get that contradiction of Harry and Voldy again, where Harry has placed his faith in Ron and Hermione and the Order and Dumbledore and everybody around Dobby. And generally, for the most part, it's worked out fairly well for him. Maybe not the others, but it's worked out well for him. Voldy places his trust and his faith in others, and it has backfired. So you get that kind of contradiction again between the two.
I'll add you another curveball, because then you got Dumbledore, who both trusted and didn't trust at the same time, and see how it worked in some ways and it did not work in some other ways. And yet he was always preaching, like you said, the idea of care for people, keep them close, tell them things because you can trust them.
It does also put Snape in an interesting position here, because if Voldy is down on Lucius and he's now down on Bellatrix, you've already risen to a pretty high place. Now there's like you, and there's a fairly decent gap here. So now Voldy's starting to realize, like, okay, I've had a lot of people fail me. And not just, Jenn and I and Julie and I have had many, many talks about Death Eaters and you just said people fail Voldy all the time. It's kind of the ineptitude of some of his Death Eaters to not get the job done that he has said, but he's trusted them to do a job and they just haven't done the job. Harry's trusted the Order to protect him. The Order has done that job for the most part to protect him. So Voldy's like, why should I be trusting people right now? I can't trust people. I gotta go do it myself.
Well, if I were Snape, I don't know if I would want to be given this information. Because like you said, like Bellatrix was at the top. She has fallen down. Lucius was at the top. He has fallen way down. If you are in if you're in close proximity with someone who is a maniac, dictator, murderer, you want to be high up, but not at the top. Because, if something fails, you are the first to get blamed, and that position can go to anybody else.
That's a great distinction that you made of close to the top.
Yep.
Not the top, though.
Not the top.
But you don't want to be in the middle or the lower part of that because you might just die at that point because he might not value you highly enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
He still values Lucius enough to, even though he's failed him a couple of different times, he's still alive at least. So he at least values him there. So, he was at one point the top of that chain. And he's still in the inner circle, so he can't have fallen too far, despite his appearance and his demeanor of late. But, it's just interesting to see the hierarchy of the Death Eaters and how Voldy has trusted and put his faith in these people and how it's turned out.
I think that what's interesting, though, is even though we're talking about the how Harry has trusted people and it's turned out for him and how Voldemort hasn't trusted people, and also even bringing in Dumbledore and him trusting some people and not trusting others, I think that the trust is being done in a very different way because Harry is trusting people, but it's a lot more collaborative. It's a lot more of there's mutual trust between them, there's problem solving, there's some level of respect for the other person's opinion, right? So like if he talks to Ron and Hermione about things, they offer feedback, he takes their feedback into consideration. So he's trusting them with this information, but he's also working with them. And for Voldemort, it's a lot more of I'm trusting you to do it, but I'm telling you what to do, and I'm not really taking into consideration what your skills are, what your talents are. I'm assuming that you should be able to do it, and therefore you not doing it means that you have failed me. There's not really room for any specific Death Eater to come back and say, hey, I don't know that I can do this. I'm not confident in this. There's no... So it is a trust, and it is, this parallel that we have of how this trust is playing out, but it's playing out in very different ways. And if I can make one more point on this, it's also that with Dumbledore, where you brought him up where sometimes trust worked and sometimes trust didn't, the one big thing that I think of in terms of him not trusting Harry ended up going against both of them, right? So it is still this consistent thing of you need to trust people, but you also need to be able to work with them.
So I completely agree that the collaboration was there with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. That's been a very open communication line. However, I think it's interesting that it's flipped in Harry's case. So Voldy is the one individual telling the group what to do, right? But I think Harry, in his case, has been subservient to the people that he's had to trust and rely on. Because through the books, and it really erupts in Order of the Phoenix, and why he's so, quote-unquote emo throughout the whole book, is because the people he's relying on most aren't telling him anything.
Yes.
They're keeping him in the dark.
That's a good point.
So it's flipped. Instead of the one person keeping everybody else in the dark about goals and motives and everything else, it's flipped. The group is keeping him in the dark about what's really going on. So it's similar in a really interesting way, and it's also different in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
It's kind of inverted, which again goes to that Harry and Voldy flip of each other.
Yeah.
We can talk about Voldy and Harry for a long, long time, and we could talk about the Death Eater dynamics for a long, long time.
We should do an episode on the parallels and contrasts between Harry and Voldemort.
The one that we just discussed, I think, is something that I hadn't actually really thought that deeply about before, but it's actually really fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, when you were talking about it, I'm like, oh, this is so interesting, because there are some really oddly inverted similarities here that's fascinating. But now that Harry has come back from his excursion into Voldy's essence, Harry knows that Voldy knows that Harry knows.
Everyone knows that they know.
So Harry does confirm now that the last Horcrux is at Hogwarts, and I told you so. Harry and Ron get immediately to planning. They're like, okay, what do we need? We got this. How do we, where are we going to start our invasion or incursion into Hogwarts?
I love all these invasions.
I know, it's like, it's aggressive. How are we going to get to Hogsmeade? How are we going to do this? And Hermione's like, what are we doing? It's like, stop. We can't just go. You said yourself in recapping this whole thing that it's going to be impossible for you to get there.
I mean, in general, too, just think of how exhausted they are. Like, they just went through such an adrenaline rush, and they had to stay awake while they were on top of the dragon. And
They gotta be physically
they're
drained.
so tired. And then to now be like, we have to move or else we're literally on our time crunch. The hourglass has been turned over. There's a limited amount of sand left. Like, we have to do it now.
So you get this dynamic of Hermione saying they need a plan and Harry emphasizing action, which generally throughout the 7 books that's their dynamic.
That's the dynamic.
I mean, that is what they do. It comes down to this pivotal point in the last book in the series where they're having this conflict again. They need a plan and emphasizing action. And at this pivotal point, I can't help but thinking they're both right.
Yeah.
Neither of them are wrong here.
Yeah.
You need to have some sort of idea of how you're going to do this. But at the same time, you cannot wait. You literally must go now.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating conflict that they're going to have to sort through here in a very short amount of time.
I mean, to be fair to Harry's point of things, the only way for them to figure out what dangers are ahead of them is to go face them. So if we apparate into Hogsmeade and we're suddenly in some kind of booby trap, or there's Death Eaters just waiting for us, or there's nothing, we're clear to go, like, no one is going to be available to warn us about it. So we just need to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's an insanely dangerous environment that they are voluntarily, very quickly going to. And it's interesting that they're all aware of it, and they're like, we don't have another option.
Yeah.
Like, we got to do it. It's just what's the best way to do it. And how we leave this chapter is they all get under the invisibility cloak.
After first watching the dragon soar away. I like the dragon.
Elizabeth is team dragon.
Very much so. I just like the fact that they literally waited, and they're like, oh, there it goes. Okay, now we can go.
They all get under the invisibility cloak and apparate on their way to Hogwarts. And that's how this chapter ends. And like I said in the last episode, the last chapter we did, this is the part of the book where I don't care what time of day or night, what plans you have to finish this book at this point. I mean, there's no stopping now. You know, Voldy knows, and there's now a time limit. I mean, like, this action gets accelerated to the nth degree.
Yeah, this is definitely I need to know what happens next.
Yeah.
This is like the cliffhanger of all cliffhangers.
Yes.
You know, I mean, this is it. So we will close this episode. We hope you enjoyed the chapter discussion. Let us know. You can comment on the episode by reaching out on our socials at HogwartsAPod. You can find us on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on YouTube. You can also leave a comment on our Spotify if you're listening to us on that particular app. We are also available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and everywhere you can find a podcast. So please leave a comment. Participate in the polls that are also up on Spotify or up on our socials if we transport them over. But with that, we will wrap it up. Next week, we begin this crazy, chaotic rush towards the end of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. So it's getting to that time. But thank you all for listening, and we will be back. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.